what we are trying during all these discussions and talks here is to see if we cannot radically bring about a transformation of the mind.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Full house. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for taking out time of your day and for visiting us here at the center. I'll do a short introduction about the International Center for Sustainability. It might be the first time that you're visiting. I'm Jade Hagan, Chief of Staff here at the center. I run it with a fantastic team. A lot of us are spread out, so please find us and talk to us about our mission and our very important work. We are a think tank. We're a research center. Our mission is on focusing on fostering a deeper relationship between the West and India, with sustainability at the core of everything that we do. We do research, we provide learning and development training, and we influence policy. And we do that because we really believe that India is incredibly important in getting sustainability right in the future, and we want to be part of that story here at the center. You are attending one of our K-lectures this evening. Our K-lecture series is named after Jiddu Krishnamurti, who you will see on your right. Krishnamurti is a world-renowned philosopher, author, speaker, spiritual leader, and teacher. He advocated against following any firmed doctrine. He is a teacher, on following any firmed doctrine, and really wanted people to be free from the constraints of cultural and spiritual conditioning, and really emphasized critical self-thought and reflection. And it is in the spirit and ethos of that we host these K-lectures. A few small household matters before we start. I'd like to ask everyone to please make sure that your phones are on silent. There are Wi-Fi access cards spread out over the chairs. We are at a lower level, and if you do need to be able to be in contact with home, I urge you to get on the website, on the Wi-Fi. Feel free to take pictures and post if you like about the event. You can find our handle on LinkedIn under the International Center for Sustainability. This event will be recorded, so you can find it back on our YouTube channel and on our website for future reference. We're not expecting a fire drill, but if there were to be one, the fire exits are at the two main doors behind us. One leads out to the courtyard, and one will take you back up to where we entered. And lastly, if you do need to use the washrooms, they are just up the stairs to where you came in. Females on the first and males a floor up. So this evening we are incredibly happy and lucky to have Dr. Sailesh Rao with us here at the center. Dr. Rao is a world-renowned environmental activist. He is the founder of Climate Healers. He has been recognized by The Guardian as a very influential, foremost thought leader on environmental activism and really saving the planet. A lot of you might know Dr. Rao from his Netflix shows and documentaries that he's produced, namely Cowspiracy, Milked, What the Health, to name a few. There have been many more. Dr. Rao is also a big book has published numerous books on the topic that we're discussing this evening. And we're very happy that he is here to share his thoughts with us all on climate healing, moving from climate heating to climate healing. So this evening we are talking about compassionate food systems for planetary healing. And without further ado, I hand over the floor to Dr. Rao. So we look forward to your talk.
Thank you, Jay. The topic I was told is how can food systems heal the planet? And that's what it was. And Jade has told me to stick to 30 minutes, not go over. So I'm going to turn that on. Thank you so much for organizing this. And I also want to acknowledge Dina, who's not here, for arranging this. And so I've been giving talks about how food systems are so important in addressing the challenges that we face today. And I've been working on this for the last 19 years. In fact, when I started, I'm an engineer by profession. So I used to work on the internet. And you may see a blue wire hanging around somewhere, which has a protocol that I invented. So that's my claim to fame in the technical era. And I was working on making the same thing run 10 times faster in 2005. And I was getting frustrated because it had become a very political endeavor, whereas when I was working on it before, it was a collegial endeavor, and I really enjoyed it. So I came home one day and I turned on the TV, and there was Vice President Al Gore talking about global warming. And I was rooted to my seat. I couldn't move. I watched what he was saying, and I told my wife, if half of what he's saying is true, I feel like I'm wasting my time working on making the same thing run 10 times faster. Not only that, I feel like everybody should be working on that. And she said, if you think it's that important, why don't you look into it? So that's how it started. Okay? And within 3 months, I told her, it's actually far worse than what he's saying. So we have to close our company and focus on this full time. And then I wrote to Mr. Gore saying, how can I help you? And I didn't hear back from him for a few months. Then I got a letter saying, would you like to come and get trained by me? So he invited me to be one of the trainees. And I was in the second batch that he trained. Now, meanwhile, I had been studying, what is happening in the environment. And I realized that the animal agriculture industry is taking up a lot of land. So during the training, I asked him a question. I asked Mr. Gore, if we could restore the forests on the land we are using for animal agriculture, can we not reverse climate change? I was just doing back-of-the-envelope calculations because there is 3 times as much carbon stored on land than in the atmosphere. And 1/3 of the land is used for grazing animals, and hardly any carbon is stored there. So I was just doing back-of-the-envelope calculations. So he turned to Roy Neal, his chief of staff, and he said, how did he get in here? And I realized that there was something that they didn't want to talk about. Okay? Now, when there is something that someone doesn't want to talk about, I know that's where the problem is. So I started focusing on that. And within a year, I went vegan. Okay? I was a vegetarian until then, and I thought I was doing okay. In fact, the data was, the papers were saying that I'm only a little bit worse than vegan. Okay? And so I believed it, because that's the official data. But I went to this forest in Rajasthan, and I saw what was happening. I saw this fence, and to the right of the fence, I could see lush green forest. And to the left, it was barren land. And I could see old cows walking around eating anything new that was growing on the ground. And I realized I had been fooled. So there is in our profession, we call it local sensitivity analysis versus global sensitivity analysis. So what they were doing in the papers was local sensitivity analysis. If you do a global sensitivity analysis, it turns out that vegetarian is actually the worst thing you can do. And when I realized that, I went vegan on the spot. Let me explain to you why that is the case. As a vegetarian, I was an ethical vegetarian. I did not want the cows to be hurt. I didn't mind drinking their milk, but I wanted them to live out their lives. I wanted their children to drink their milk and just take the excess milk for my consumption. right? And I realized if that's what they were trying to do in Rajasthan, in the villages, they were letting the cows live out their lives. And the cows were walking around eating anything new that was growing on the ground. So by the time the cows were finished, there was nothing for the deer to eat. And the deer dies. When the deer dies, the tiger dies. And I realized that if everyone did what I wanted, there would be 16 times as many cows on the planet as there are today. Why? Because right now, cows are killed around the age of 5, at least in Western countries. So they get through 3 cycles of impregnation and milking, and then they are chopped up and turned into beef. So if we let the cows live out their lives, they have a lifespan of 20 to 25 years. So you would need 4 times as many cows. If you let the calf drink half the milk, you need to double the number of cows. Right? And if you let the male calves live out their lives, you again have to double the number of cows. 4 times 2 times 2. So I realized it's completely unsustainable, my ethical vegetarian lifestyle. And not only that, by consuming milk, I was paying for the cow on a daily basis because I'm buying milk daily. And when I pay for the cow on a daily basis and she's finished with giving milk, she's now all paid for. She's chopped up and turned into cheap beef. She's too old to be steak, so she just becomes ground beef. And this is the source of cheap hamburgers. So I realized I was subsidizing the hamburger industry. And that made me feel awful as a human being. You know, I felt a sense of shame. And thank God, I was in a frame of mind where I welcomed negative feelings. Because most of the time, we don't welcome negative feelings. But when I felt that sense of shame, I queried, why do I feel that? Because I'm doing something really wrong. So I decided to change on the spot. I went vegan. And then I said, how am I going to do this? I love my pedas, I love my curd rice, I love my pizza. Can I really do this? This was, 2008. It's a long time ago. And then I said, I'm going to give myself a week. And stick to it for a week and see what happens. And I discovered I could make curd with soy milk. So I started making soy curd at home. And then I had vegan pizza. There's already vegan pizza available in the US at that time. And I found that delicious. And then I found that there are other sweets I can eat, not just pedas. There are plenty of sweets. So we live in a world of abundance, literally. And we have been given that abundance now to figure out what is the right thing to do. So after a week, at that time we were taking care of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had a stroke and she was paralyzed on one side and she couldn't cook anymore. So I became the cook in the family because my mother-in-law didn't like anything my wife cooked. She would find fault with it, right? And my wife stopped cooking for her. One time she cooked something and told her, Sailesh cooked it. And she said, oh, this tastes so good. And at that point she said, I'm never cooking for you again. So I became the cook, right? And she asked me to make Gujarati curry. And she had taught me how to make curry before. So I said, okay, I'm going to try making it with soy curry, soy yogurt. So I made soy curry, and she told me, this is the best curry you ever made. And at that point I realized, this is easy. We can do this. So that was my journey. I started off that way. And I did it for the environment, basically. People come to veganism from different angles. I'd say there are 4 portals to veganism. One is environment, the other is health, the third is ethics, and the fourth is spirituality. Literally, veganism is ahimsa. It's the implementation of ahimsa. Okay, so that's the fourth portal. Now, after I went vegan for the environment, I forgot to take my painkillers one day. I had been taking painkillers every day since the age of 40 because I was diagnosed with arthritis in my knee and my ankle. And it used to be painful if I didn't take it. So one day I forgot to take my painkillers and I didn't feel any pain. And I told my wife, I think I didn't take my painkillers today and I don't feel any pain. She said, then tomorrow don't take any painkiller and see what happens. So the next day I didn't take any painkillers. And by evening, I was jumping up and down saying, my God, I feel like a 16-year-old again. No more pain. You know, when you don't have pain, you realize how amazing it is to live without pain. You know, because we're used to this chronic pain otherwise. So my health improved unknowingly. I wasn't expecting it. My health improved. And then I watched a movie called Earthlings. It is soul-searing. I don't know how else to put it. It just literally tears your soul apart to watch that movie. It's just a documentary on how animals are processed in different industries. So it starts with food and then clothing, it goes through entertainment, pets. Even the pet industry is full of suffering. Right? So it has these 5 sections. They go through these different ways in which we use animals. And at the end of which, I became an ethical vegan. Ethical vegan meaning, I am vegan for the animals. No animal should ever have to go through what they're going through. And when we have the power to do whatever we want with them, and we can live happily without exploiting them at all, I think it's incumbent upon us to take that step. So that's what I advocate today. I consider myself a human, earth, animal liberation activist. Okay, so heal activist. I'm a part of climate healers, right? I'm a heal activist. So food system is central to who we are as human beings. Food is our culture. It's got memories. It's got history built into it, and it is what makes us human. The food we eat. Remember, we were all one family back in Africa 50,000 years ago. And we migrated out of Africa and went to every part of the world. And those who went to cold climates had to eat animals to survive, right? So this is why the base food in European countries and in North America is a slab of meat and some vegetables around it. And they are going vegan. The base food for India and tropical countries is vegetable food, basically plant foods. It's rice and some dal or roti sabji, idli sambar. These are all vegan foods. So now nature has given us the abundance that you can get idli sambar here in London during winter. You can get bananas in winter. So you can get any kind of food you want almost anywhere. So with this abundance, she's asking us, would you like to make the right choice so that we can all thrive? So food system is central to who we are as a culture, who we are as human beings. It's also central to the sustainability crisis. It is the cause of the crisis. It's one of the main causes of the crisis. This is the work I've been doing, the research work I've been doing. And it is also the main solution to it. Okay? It is so central that I claim that if we do not address the food system first, we are going down the wrong path. If we address fossil fuels first, we are going down the wrong path. But that's what everyone is talking about. Everyone is talking about fossil fuels. I've had a hard time getting people to hear my message. Because after that encounter with Vice President Al Gore, I spent another 4 or 5 years trying to convince him to address animal agriculture as one of the primary reasons for climate change. And eventually I had to part ways because I couldn't get through. And I started Climate Healers in 2007 primarily to solve climate change. How do you heal the climate? And so if you look at that, climate change is like the fever that the earth has. The fever is always a symptom, not a disease. So I use the analogy of, a patient going to a doctor with heart disease, diabetes, and a lump the size of a coconut by the side of his head, plus a 1 degree Celsius fever. So the doctor examines you, says you have heart disease, you have diabetes, you have cancer, and you have a 1 degree Celsius fever. I'm going to prescribe you Tylenol so that your fever doesn't go over 2 degrees Celsius when you get a second lump on the other side of your head. Would you think that this is a good doctor? Or would you say, I want to change doctors now? But that's exactly how we are treating Mother Earth. We are talking about growing the economy. Everyone still talks about growing the economy. But trying to limit the fever to 1.5 or 2. This is not how you would like to be treated. That's not how I would like to be treated if I were a patient. I would like the doctor to figure out how to reverse my cancer, reverse my diabetes, reverse my heart disease, and heal the fever. And that begins with the food system. So, the Stockholm Resilience Institute, Stockholm Resilience Center, wrote a paper in 2009 identifying 9 planetary boundaries that we need to stay within in order to maintain the life support systems of the planet, in order to allow life to thrive. And in 2009, they said we had violated 3 of them. We have gone over the limits on 3 of them. The third was climate change. It wasn't even the worst. The second was nitrogen and phosphorus, how much nitrogen and phosphorus we are using. And the worst was biodiversity loss, the loss of wild animals on the planet. So that was 2009. 2009 there were 3 planetary boundary transgressions. By 2015 it became 4. They added land system change also as a violation. And by 2023 there were 6. So it's like a 3-alarm fire in 2009 becoming a 4-alarm fire in 2015 and a 6-alarm fire in 2023. So the alarms are blaring. And every one of these transgressions, even one of these transgressions, if we leave it there, it's sufficient to kill life as we know it. So it's serious. It's a serious alarm that's blaring on the planet. But the good news is that if the world goes vegan, all 6 of these alarms will come towards the green zone. Most likely even come into the green zone, but definitely every one of them will come towards the green zone. It's the single most powerful act that we can do. Now, it's not, the food system is the beginning. Going beyond that, it is how we treat animals. Because you could be eating plant foods and wearing leather jackets. And if you did that, somebody is going to raise the cow just to skin her. So this is why veganism is central beyond the food system. But the food system is the key. Now the reason we are in this predicament has to do with our history, has to do with colonialism, has to do with social justice, it has to do with poverty. All of the issues that we are trying to solve all comes down to the way we are living now. So I was, the Guardian had done a report on colonialism in India and why Indians get diabetes faster than Europeans. For the same body mass index, South Asians get diabetes at 2.5 times the rate as Europeans. And South Asians are 25% of the world population, but 60% of the heart disease patients. So why is that? So they did an analysis, they reported on it, and they traced it back to colonialism and what happened during colonialism. Between 1857 and 1947, when the British Raj was in India, India went through 25 famines. And over 60 million Indians died of hunger. And as a result, all those who could not store fat easily died off. So those who survived could store fat easily. So they had an excess of fat and they could tide over the famine. And you keep doing that repeatedly, you'll basically do a genetic selection. So only those who could store fat easily survived. And so now we are the descendants of those who could store fat easily, and we are storing it. And we are getting all these chronic diseases because of the rich foods we are eating. So I realized that the reason the British Raj was doing that, it was basically all engineered famines, most of them. The reason was that slavery had been abolished, but they needed labor in other places. So how do you persuade people to migrate? Make them hungry. Then they'll get on a ship and go to other places and become laborers. So it was a labor recruitment tool. So hunger was used as a labor recruitment tool for the kinds of work that people don't normally want to do. So today, we are extracting 6 times as much food as we need from the planet in terms of total weight. We eat about 1.6 billion tons of food. We need to eat 1.6 billion tons of food per year in terms of dry weight, but we are extracting about 9 billion tons of food. Most of it is being fed to our animals. So 800 million people are going hungry at any given point in time. And 9 million people are dying of hunger or hunger-related causes every year. Simultaneously, 30 million people are dying from eating too much, from diseases of excess, from diabetes, heart disease. These things can be prevented if you just eat right. So we have created a food system that is not serving anybody. And I'm a systems engineer. I like to analyze systems and understand why they behave the way they behave. And I realized that this food system, the objective function, so any system has an objective function. What are you trying to accomplish in the system? The objective function in the food system is to ensure that the most exotic food is available to the richest person at any given time. That's what it's designed for. That's what it's optimized for. It's not designed to ensure that everyone has access to healthy food, because everyone is eating healthy food. So as a result, we have created a food system that's full of waste. So much food is being wasted. I consider all the food that we're giving to animals as part of the waste. Because we are feeding them about 7.3 billion tons of food every year, and they are giving us 0.19 billion tons of food. So there is a 39-to-1 reduction going through the animal by the time you get to our plate. And this includes all animal foods put together. Milk, eggs, meat, all put together. That's the average ratio, 39-to-1. So they are providing us with 12% of the food we eat, the land animals. And 85% of the food we eat is already plant-based. It's already sourced by plants. So when I say let's go to a vegan food system, I'm saying let's make that 85% into 100%. It's not such a big step because we are already eating a lot of plant foods. The remaining 3% comes from the ocean, for which we have been destroying the entire ocean. What is happening in the ocean is far worse than what's happening on land. So on land, we deforest about 40 to 50 million acres of land, if you look at the gross deforestation that happens. And in the ocean, we deforest the bottom of the ocean 4 billion acres every year. That is the equivalent of the area of South America every year. Just to get 3% of our food. And the only reason this is economical, it's even possible to do this, is because it's heavily subsidized by governments. And why is it heavily subsidized by governments? Are they trying to kill us? No. They are scared of us. That's why it's done this way. They are scared of us. Because if tomorrow your markets do not have any fish, they're going to get voted out at the next election. They know that. So they're trying to desperately ensure that the people get what they want. I'll give you an analogy, equivalent. I was in Odisha, they call it these days, Odisha, in a village. And the villagers had just signed a contract with the middleman to supply vegetables to be sold in Bhubaneswar, the capital city. And the middleman had told them, your vegetables should not have any holes in them, they should all be straight and nice, and he was telling them how to grow the vegetables. You have to put this pesticide on it, you have to do this on it, etc. Right? And they were puzzled. So they were growing the vegetables for the middleman over there, and they were growing their own vegetables way over there, because they knew that there was something wrong with what they were doing here. So they asked me, you live in a city, right? I said, yeah, I do. They said, why do people in the city want to eat vegetables that even the worms don't want to eat? And it hit me. They're so right? They're so right that we don't eat vegetables with holes in them. In fact, we pick them out. If we see vegetables with holes in them, we don't put that in our shopping cart. And it sends a message to the middleman that any vegetable with holes in them will not get sold. So he's trying to now ensure that there are no vegetables with holes in them in the supply chain. So he is now telling people to go put pesticides to grow the vegetables so that there are no holes in them. So we are literally, by our consumer action, the way we pick out vegetables, we are causing our own food poisoning to happen. In the same way, when we go and demand fish, when there is no fish in the ocean, we are causing our governments to subsidize the fishing industry. So our governments are like the middleman. And the industry is like the villagers. And we are the ones who are causing it to happen. So we have tremendous power, the flip side of it. We have tremendous power to shift the system. So if we change what we eat, we send a message, not only what we eat, but in how we purchase things. We send a message to everyone that that is what we want now. and they will change to accommodate us. So I realized that we have this power, that it's all due to us and the way we are acting that's causing this to happen. There's no one to blame. It's a system issue. System has its objective functions, and then you have these consequences that come from implementing them. So how do you solve this? We are in a capitalist system, right? In the capitalist system requires growth at all times. Without growth, the whole thing collapses. Why? Because we are running a Ponzi scheme. That's all it is. And all Ponzi schemes collapse if they don't grow. So, when they did the 17 Sustainable Development Goals at the UN, they listed, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education. So all these great goals. And then they stuck in goal number 8 of economic growth. And I looked at that and I said, wait a minute, if I meet no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, do I care that the economy is growing? Does anyone care that the economy is growing? You have no poverty, you have zero hunger. So why is that there? It's there because we are pretending to meet all the goals by just growing the economy. So it's not a serious effort to meet all the goals. So then I said, let's assume that we are serious about meeting all the goals. How would we do this? First thing, we have to throw out the redundant goal, which is economic growth, goal number 8. And then, how do you meet zero hunger? Well, feed everybody healthy food. If we can feed 40 billion animals their food, can we not feed 8 billion humans their food? Of course we can. Right? But we are choosing not to. So my suggestion for getting a food system to, I'll end. My suggestion for getting the food system to transform is to get every place of worship to have healthy food freely available to everyone. Anyone who walks into a temple should get free food that's healthy. Whole food, plant-based meals. Okay? There's even a whole category of universal meals that we have created with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. These are meals that don't have common allergens, that anyone can eat. This is why they're called universal meals. So they don't have garlic and onion also for Jains. And so have these meals available at every place of worship, whether it is a mosque or a temple or a church, because every one of us is near some place of worship around the world. Okay? So the purpose of community is to ensure that free food is available there. So that subsidizes healthy food. And I bet you the system will transform. So, thank you very much, and I'm open to questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rao. I hope everyone found that as insightful as I did. Post-it note has come along with me. I'm sure many of you will have some questions, and we'd like to take this opportunity for a Q&A. So we'll take questions in a few batches, and if anyone would like the mic, Pravar can walk around and pass it along. I'm happy to kick off because I think you touched on a very important topic just now. Firstly, we had the pleasure of sitting down together this afternoon, and we recorded a podcast, which I urge you all to think about, all to listen to. And it was wonderful and very informative, and we spoke about deforestation. We spoke about the the transgressions that are taking place, and how veganism really is a slot for that, and a solution for that. And there were so many epiphanies during that conversation, and statistics that really speak to understanding the weight and the nature of the problem that we're facing. And I love how you touched on fossil fuel and how that is a major topic of conversation that we're all having, right? We're all talking about migrating away from fossil fuels. We're all talking about the greening of our energy consumption. And you shared with me today that if we do that first, without actually tackling global warming through solving it with reforestation, which is an outcome of veganism, because we then return so much of the planet to wildlife and nature, that we're actually walking into a huge disastrous situation with immediate more climate heating. And who would ever think that's the case, right? Who would ever think that reducing our fossil fuel consumption would lead to an actual heating of the planet before we then enter a healing and a cooling area. So could you maybe talk to that effect a little bit and share that knowledge with us so that we understand the power of global cooling through veganism versus focusing solely on fossil fuel reduction?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Jim Hansen, who is considered to be the grandfather of climate science, he wrote a paper in 2013 called The Faustian Bargain of Fossil Fuels. It's a deal with the devil that we have made. Because when you burn fossil fuels, they're emitting these heating gases like carbon dioxide that go and stay in the atmosphere for years and they warm the climate. But they're also emitting cooling gases like sulfur dioxide. And these cooling gases are short-lived. They only stay in the atmosphere for a few weeks and they disappear. So they're constantly being replenished. Now the IPCC, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, had estimated that the cooling gases are actually masking about half of the heating. So we are heating the earth by about 2.6 watts per square meter. The sun is giving us 240 watts per square meter. We increased it by 2.6 watts per square meter, which is like a 1% increase on what the sun is doing. And that's causing the global warming. Okay? But the sulfur dioxide, the cooling gases, are 1.3 watts per square meter. That's the cooling that they're doing. So in effect, we have heated the earth by 3.9 watts per square meter, but we are only experiencing 2.6 watts of it. So if I were to wave a magic wand today and convert the energy infrastructure from fossil fuels to renewable sources overnight, tomorrow the heating will be 3.9 watts per square meter. So you'll instantly see a jump. I mean, in a few weeks you'll see a jump because the cooling gases will disappear in a few weeks. And that's what we experienced in 2023 and 2024. Because what happened was, in 2020, the International Maritime Organization passed a ruling that in future all ships that in the open seas have to burn fuel with sulfur content less than 0.5%. Until then, they were burning sulfur content of 3.5% or less. So the sulfur over the ocean declined in 2020 onwards. So within a few weeks, the ocean got warmed up. So there was more heating above the ocean. But because the ocean is this huge body of water, it has tremendous inertia. So the effect of that increase in heating of 0.5 watts, I think the estimate is now 0.5 watts per square meter of heating that happened because of that, was felt 4 years later. So 1/3 of it will be felt 4 years later, another 1/3 will be felt within the next 100 years, and then another 1/3 will be felt in 1,000 years. So even though the increase happened right away in heating, the temperature effect takes a while because of the inertia of the ocean. That's why 2023 and 2024 were the hottest years ever, because the ocean warmed up. So by analyzing that, now clearly the International Maritime Organization has scientists. Why didn't they know this? Well, they analyzed it and they thought it would increase by 0.1 watt per square meter, not 0.5 watts per square meter. And what Jim Hansen calculated is that when you burn sulfur over a pristine environment like the ocean, it is actually much more potent than we thought. That's a nonlinear effect. And therefore, the overall cooling from sulfur dioxide is not 1.3 watts per square meter, it's actually 2.3 watts per square meter. Okay, so his theory is that sulfur dioxide is masking 2.3 watts per square meter of heating, and carbon dioxide is actually more powerful than we thought.
So in essence, we need this at the
Desperately
moment.
need.
We need this cooling gas as a component to not overheat too quickly.
Correct.
So you are not advocating for fossil fuels.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. You believe in a green transition and renewable sources of energy, but you say there's a safe methodology to getting there.
Right.
And you enlightened me during our talk this afternoon about why veganism is the first step to that.
Right.
And reclaiming natural land. We spoke about planting 1 trillion more trees that we need, carbon capture potential, so that link specifically.
Absolutely. So if we first eliminate fossil fuels, we are going to see this heating immediately. But if we eliminate animal agriculture first, right, so that we are no longer using animals, then we release 40% of the land back to nature, as well as the entire ocean back to nature. And then nature starts sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. Because every tree that you see, the entire bulk came from the atmosphere. All the carbon in that tree came from the atmosphere. Okay? So as trees grow back, they suck down the carbon from the atmosphere. And as the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere comes down, then you can dial down the fossil fuel engine. Slowly. Don't do it too fast. You do it slowly, but over time you can dial it down faster and faster and faster and then turn it off. So we have to experience that heating that we are not experiencing now, but do it gradually. So we will experience this kind of heating for another 25 years, and then you will see the cooling happen.
Right. So the power is really within us and our consumption choices and the decisions that we choose to make, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can I take a question from the audience, please? We have a few hands. I suggest we do a batch of 3 questions, and then I'll help you remember them, Sailesh.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Could you please introduce yourself
Hi,
and where you're from and your question?
Yeah, my name's Nikita, and we've met briefly, and I've asked a few questions, but my question was about your time with Al Gore's training team, and you mentioned there was some resistance when you found out about your findings in veganism and how that should be the first thing to be addressed. Can you talk to the resistance you felt, and is there anything you noticed in how much leverage farmers are having on the governments or bodies like this?
Thank you, Nikita. So that's our first question. Second question, Harsh at the back, and then Yanis in the middle.
So thanks a lot for that talk. It's kind of a question linked to that.
Could you please introduce yourself, Harsh?
Yeah, my name is Harsh. I actually work for Shell. I work in the renewable energies teams working on this energy transition. So I think the consumerism approach is quite clear, right? So the kind of bottom down is always the most effective way of making change. Really interested to hear your experience of what that top-down approach has been and how receptive governments have been, because I suppose from a systems thinking point of view, going from that 85% to the 15% has a massive impact on people, farmers, livelihoods.
Yes.
And that's why politicians don't want to react. So there's this idea of maybe scarcity that comes in when you're trying to move towards a plant-based food system, whereas in the fossil fuel world, if you're a government trying to incentivize a move towards solar, wind, whatever, there's an idea of abundance, free electricity, free energy. So it's a much easier top-down approach to do. So really interested to hear your thoughts and your experience of
Thank you very much. And let's go to the Yanis in the middle, and then we can do a next round of questions.
Okay. Hello. Thank you for your talk. That was really insightful. My name is Janos. I am a researcher into spiritual agricultural practices at Coventry University. So the question is really, what do you see as the role of draft animals as part of the transition to a fossil fuel, low-tech agriculture, without killing them, of course?
Okay. Thank you. Should we kick off with Al Gore?
Yeah. Fundamentally, the resistance I found was that he didn't want to deal with cultural issues. It was more about technological solutions. Cultural issues were difficult for politicians to go and say, I know how to change how you should be eating. But talking about changing your light bulbs or changing to solar energy, it also has a growth story. It's a green growth story. So that's why I think his team was not interested in hearing my side of it. He also made it very clear during my training itself that his motivation is to preserve civilization as we know it. Whereas my motivation is to solve the problem. And those two are not compatible.
Thank you very much. Harsh's question on top-down government approach.
Yeah, unfortunately the governments are all stuck in the same growth mindset and the growth game that we are playing. In the growth game, anything that has already grown wants to grow more. Okay? So the example I gave during the podcast was the healthcare system. 90% of the costs come from eight risky behaviors. And so, and those risky behaviors include poor diet and lack of exercise and so on, right? But when 90% of the costs come from 8 risky behaviors, 90% of the healthcare economy is driven by these 8 risky behaviors. And so those 8 risky behaviors get encouraged in the system. This is why you have candy at eye level for children in supermarkets, and children being taught to eat food that's bad for them, literally. We really, addict them into things that are bad for them. And because everyone is trying to grow. So unless we address that growth issue, we're not going to solve the problem from the top down. And this is why I'm looking at bottom-up pressure for the top to say, okay, let's change the game. And I even told Jade that we may have to start a new game, which is not about growth, in parallel, and play that, and then invite people to come over. So have like a education program, and then they qualify to join this new game.
Thank you. Yanis' question?
Was about
Draft animals.
Draft animals, yes. Today, it's not as efficient to use animals than to run tractors or whatever for agriculture. And this is why people tend to not use draft animals and go to tractors and so on, right? Like fossil fuel based methods of growing food. There are people in villages who are still using draft animals. and they are being used also for milking and so on. The males do the draft, the pulling of the plow, and the females are being milked. Overall, we have to transition to a situation where we are no longer exploiting animals. I believe that it is a spiritual change that we need to do, because they have served us for so long, for 10,000 years. I say that she's our mother, a cow is our mother, and she has let us suckle her for 10,000 years. And now she's saying, grow up. Right? Then we have to wean ourselves from exploiting animals. So that's the transition I need to figure out. How do you do that in a way that everyone can benefit from it? Ultimately, the animals are here with us too. Yeah. So one thought we have been pondering about is, if you could somehow get impregnation of animals to be banned, because that's a direct exploitation of the feminine of the animal. If we can ban that, that would have a huge impact. And I think we could get enough support for that, from the people.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a few more questions from the audience. We have a question in the middle. I'm not sure if there's still a question at the back or not. It's a question, so maybe first we'll do a triangle. Yes, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hiya, I'm Melda. Thank you so much for that talk. It was very inspirational. I'm a PhD researcher in animal rights activism in the UK. I am originally Turkish and I grew up in Turkey. And recently, at a pub, I proposed the idea that we need a spiritual awakening to convert everyone. And my idea was to drug everyone with magic mushrooms through the water system.
Great proposition.
And then, this was last week, by the way, so when you said religious institutions and religion and mosques and churches, temples, that was spot on. That really clicked something within me. I'm curious if you have a game plan. And because I grew up in Turkey, I've seen the holiday of the sacrificial feast. So there is a major disconnect with people connecting with those animals but killing them on the streets in the Middle East particularly. Because in the West everyone goes, if all slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would go vegan, blah. But yeah, my question I think is how...
Game plan. Do you have
what's the game plan? And how do we get vegan imams? Especially like Muslim countries, because I know in all the Semitic religions, in Islam it's, a holiday, not a must-do, but a holiday. So maybe for Islam, if I can get some insights, I'd be very happy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Second question. Middle, gentleman.
Hey, my name's Amandeep, and I was just listening to different aspects, and also the growth aspect. And rather than a structural one, like within veganism itself, with that growth and then turning to food options, how are you seeing that with food that's being produced that isn't really healthy, vegan alternatives that we're having? I've had a lot of gut issues as well, and that made me think a lot, because maybe some of the choices that I was making unwittingly, now I am more educated on negatively impacting health. So I wanted to know how you have seen that and the growth of that industry and what you think about it, basically.
Yeah, good question. We spoke about that this afternoon too.
Right.
Yes. Last question, please. No, for you. Go ahead.
Okay, my name's Rishi. Sometimes I have some friends of mine who send me, share with me certain things on social media, expecting a response from me, and it's at that point I get stuck, and I'll tell you what it is. There's plant-based burgers, for example, soya burgers, and it's all fine. But then there's the talk of lab meat, taking the cells, and they say, well, where do you stand on this? Now, intuitively, I feel uncomfortable with that, simply because it is flesh still for me. And I understand that, that their angle to me is that, well, no animal has been harmed here.
Right.
But for me, it's still a consumption of flesh, and it's just abhorrent to me. Where do you stand on that?
Okay, well, Melda's question first, please. Do you also think it's a good idea to drug the entire population in the water system?
You may be on to something there. There is so much of culture and tradition, that's embedded in this. And I try to rationalize, assuming that everyone had the best of intentions. So I know that in the 1920s, Mahatma Gandhi tried to go vegan several times. And in 1931, when he spoke at the London Vegetarians Union, he said, I've tried it several times and I fell sick, and my doctor told me to take some milk and I got better. Okay, so this is why he continued to drink goat's milk for the rest of his life. And I think it's because he lacked vitamin B12. And vitamin B12 comes from soil bacteria. And we are the only species that washes its food and eats it. Okay? And therefore, we don't get vitamin B12 if we just eat plants. Rather than asking people to start eating some dirt, I think it's better that we take a supplement now, right? That's what I do. I take a supplement. But what our ancestors were noticing, I think, is that empirically, everyone had to eat some animal food at some point in order to thrive. So the way they did that was to tell, during festivals, kill animals and share with everybody. So you had, Muslim cultures, it was what, Ramadan and Bakrid and so on. But in Hindu cultures, it was making sure that everyone had access to, was given ghee-based sweets during festivals. So we had festivals in which we would distribute sweets to everyone, and it was made with ghee. So a little bit of animal food was made, everyone had access to it at some point in time during the year. I think this kept the population healthy because they didn't know about vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 was discovered in the 40s or 50s. And it was isolated in the 60s, and it became like a supplement that was available to everyone starting in the 70s. So that actually allowed veganism to thrive. Because until then, people didn't know why you had to eat some animals. Okay? But today, the soil has been destroyed. Even the animals are not getting enough vitamin B12. So they're being supplemented in their feed with vitamin B12. Why are we going through that? Now that we know. Right? So we have to now tell our religious leaders, what was done then, what was prescribed thousands of years ago is no longer valid. So you have to have this conversation with them that that was done for a good reason, but today it's no longer valid. Today, that animal food is bad for us because we have polluted the environment, and the animals are eating polluted food, and they're accumulating in their bodies, the pollution. So why would you eat that on a holy occasion? Ghee is highly contaminated now. So I say we don't need to be eating ghee-based sweets now.
So Melda, maybe this is a call to you through your work and your PhD to educate imams and community leaders and how to have that conversation.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd be happy to help you with that.
I'm not hopeful, but I'm happy to converse there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. The next question, the second and the third, there's some overlap there. We were talking about, earlier this afternoon also, I asked basically the same question as you did, your feelings and your thoughts about meat alternatives and then, the next step, which is actual meat, but harvested and grown in a lab. So.
Right. See, I see those as good transition foods for people who are used, Because like when I first transitioned, what did I do? I was trying to eat the same way, but I was just substituting, instead of curd, I was making soy curd. And if people are eating meat on a daily basis, they would want something that is like meat, has the same nutrition value as meat, and so on. So this is why plant-based meats are useful for that transition. But eventually we figure out that it's much healthier to eat the whole food, unprocessed foods. And I feel better now, eating whole foods. So it's a process we go through, and eventually we get there. So ultimately, our objective should be to heal ourselves first. Because only when we are healthy will we be interested in the environment. No, someone who is not healthy is not going to be interested in the environment. But we have a lot of work to do in the environment. So which is why we have to first get healthy ourselves. Because the animals are depending on us. Okay? So for that we have to eat healthy and then do the exercising and so on. Say every one of us, we know our bodies better than anyone else. So you know how to transition. The same question for lab-grown meat as well. The same issue arises. For me, is abhorrent. And I even say, if you're going to go to the effort of creating a lab cell and growing that, why do it with an animal? Isn't human flesh identical to our muscles, so it will have the optimum? Now, if that makes you queasy, that is speciesism.
That's a new word for me.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so this is why, what are we trying to... See, lab meat to me is solving a problem that does not exist. We really don't need to eat meat. We eat it because we are used to it. And for that, plant-based meats are available already. People cannot even tell the difference between Beyond Meat and the so-called regular meat. So then why do we need lab meat? It's to maintain the myth that you need to eat meat to thrive.
Perpetuating a false fallacy.
A fallacy, yes. So this is why it's funded and supported by the industry. Anytime the industry funds and supports something, I'm very suspicious of that.
Yeah. Lobby groups are powerful. This is true. We have one last question for the audience, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lindsay, and you're the systems man, and I can't get my head around this, so I want to ask you. I watched a documentary, I gave up meat. I watched another documentary, I gave up fish. I wasn't feeling very well. The dietitian said, you're not getting enough protein. Go back on them. I felt much better. Got rid of my brain fog.
Right.
Went FODMAP. Don't eat pulses, the things that a lot of vegans and vegetarians would get their protein from.
Right.
Listening to you, I want to go back again.
Yes.
But I think, what's your thought about the system of how do you get the government to want to educate the next generations so that they actually want what you want and the government isn't having to fight against them? What education programs did Al Gore even think to consider?
Right.
How do we get ahead of the game? How do we get several rungs down the ladder?
Yeah.
Is there a system that you can see that could work within education? Kids are taught about health and food. My kid comes home with leaflets all the time.
Yeah. The trouble
and
is...
false advertising as well.
We have to involve the parents also in the education program, because children are automatically vegan. They're born vegan, in my opinion. Because I went to this kindergarten class with for my granddaughter, and I asked the children, the children asked me, what does vegan mean? And I told them, imagine a rabbit comes hopping into this room. How many of you would go and play with the rabbit? They said, oh, we will all go play with the rabbit. How many of you go and hurt the rabbit? Oh, we would never hurt the rabbit. I said, then you're all vegan. That's all it is, right? And they realize, oh, that's all it is? Just being kind to animals makes me a vegan. So they went home and told their parents, I'm vegan. And I got a call from the principal saying, don't ever do that again. Okay. So it's really, we are coming home to who we really are. So we're returning to our true selves. We get educated out of it. The education system convinces you that protein is only found in animal foods, or calcium is only found in dairy foods, and therefore makes you think it's essential to eat that. So we are all under the delusion it's essential to eat that, and then the body adjusts. It tries to make do with what you're giving it. So when we then switch back to what is our normal food, should be the plant foods, it has time to adjust. It needs time to adjust. And sometimes you may have issues like what you're facing. So I would suggest, if you want to do that again, please consult a plant-based doctor, the plant-based health professionals of UK. So there are a whole list of plant-based doctors who can help you through whatever it is that you're missing. The Vegan Society has a Veg 1 supplement, which is the common things that vegans may lack. It's a supplement. It's vitamin B12, vitamin D, so a few other things, selenium, a few other things that they have in that supplement. And they say, please take that and see how you feel. It could be that, and I don't know. But go through a plant-based health professional who has to go through training in nutrition, plant-based nutrition.
And you mentioned, was it Jainism you said that don't have garlic and
onions and
which I didn't realise, because people that don't know what a FODMAP diet is if you've got leaky gut, and most people have a leaky gut without knowing, and actually onion and garlics are really bad for stomachs.
I see.
didn't know that Jainism followed that doctrine. Why do they follow that?
They do that because they don't want to eat anything that's underground, root vegetables.
There's also the Vaishnavas and certain Smarthas who don't as well, and theirs isn't for that reason, it's because they're considered pungent.
Right.
Yes. And some Buddhists as well, right? Isn't it in Buddhism?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Sailesh. I hope it's been an insightful discussion for everyone in the audience and for people who are watching this back online now. We can share some more information about climate healers and the work that Sailesh is doing in our links below. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. If you'd like to learn more about the International Centre for Sustainability and for the various types of events that we host and the K-Lecture series, there'll be QR codes up on the screen and also links online as well, so please follow us. Sailesh has asked if the audience would be willing to fill out a feedback form to help him on his very important mission. So you'll be able to find that at the back of the room. I'd like to invite you to our next K-Lecture, which will take place on April on the 24th. It is hosted by Itai Ravoni. Itai is an NGO, works at NGO Monitor, which is an organization that focuses on investigating various nefarious activities of NGOs, amongst other things. And the topic of that conversation is about NGOs, power, influence, and who is really running the show. So slightly different topic conversation than this evening, but we welcome you to that too. So thank you very much for coming this evening. We welcome you to stay for a little bit longer if you'd like to speak to Dr. Rao or ask him some questions. So we hope to see you back another time.
We'll also have